Today on the Intimacy Inquiry, I'm joined by Eve Hall, a licensed physical therapist, certified health coach, and host of the wonderful Please Me podcast. Eve specializes in sexual health and pelvic floor therapy through a practice, Inspire Health Physical Therapy and Wellness. As a Bipoc LGBTQ and Latina advocate, she's on a mission to destigmatize conversations around sex, pleasure, and intimacy. Through her podcasts and initiatives like the Orgasm Revolution, Eve empowers individuals to embrace their bodies, communicate openly, and reclaim their pleasure. We've already talked for quite a bit before we started recording, so sorry, I'm actually not missing anything, but Eve's already proved to be fascinating to talk to. And I just wanted to start, first by welcoming you, and then secondly, by asking if you could share a little bit of your story about how did you get into sexual health advocacy and what personal experiences or what sort of formative experiences led you into this field?
Yeah, so I've been a physical therapist for over 25 years, and I did pediatrics for most of my career, believe it or not. About 8 years ago, I got divorced and I moved to Florida, and I sort of was looking back on my experience as a married woman and realized that I had been in a relationship with someone who, it was a sexless relationship for many, many years. And I realized that that was a very important part of my life, and I knew that I would never, ever want to do that again. And I knew that sexuality and my sexual health was important to me, and so I went on a journey of exploration and finding myself. And I came out on the other side really passionate about talking about sexuality, and I started getting certifications in pelvic floor, and I started treating patients for sexual health conditions such as erectile dysfunction and the female equivalent, which is decreased sensitivity and dryness. And I really enjoyed having these conversations with people. If you are a coach or a therapist or a doctor, you really sometimes get a lot of details about people's lives, and I realized that this was something that I was truly interested in. But I found that a lot of the clients that would come to me would say, oh, I'm here for my treatment for erectile dysfunction, but my wife doesn't know I'm here. Or my husband doesn't know I'm here. My partner doesn't know I'm here. And I realized that there was such a big gap in communication between committed relationships. And so that was one of the reasons why I started my Please Me podcast, because I really felt that there was a need to explore these conversations and really destigmatize these conversations, because really there is no shame in sex. It is how we all got here, and it is a fundamental part of being an adult. It's our playground. And so why are we, eliminating conversations about this from our lives? So I think it's really important, and so hence why I am here.
And I think it's really a valuable resource. So if I play your podcast in the car or whatever, and it brings up topics, then it makes the discussion of the topic with my wife or whoever's with their partner, it makes it much, much easier. Because rather than suddenly bringing something up that might seem quite random, you can listen to something and think, oh, have you thought? Oh, well, and it's a conversation sparker, really. And I think the way you approach things, that you shouldn't feel shame about what you think, what you desire. You should just be able to learn how to communicate. So I do think you might be in a relationship for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whether you continue to communicate at the same rate you did when you very first got together. I don't know, maybe people don't. So I think being able to talk about what you enjoy and what you want to try, what you desire is super important, really. So when you got out of your marriage, when you had your divorce, and you decided you didn't want to live in a sexless relationship, how did that manifest itself? Were you like a kid in a sweet shop? Were you just exploring everything and anything? Did you have these sort of desires that were just hidden or restrained while you were married?
I think I had a lot of desires while I was married, yes, and they went unmet, and so hence why during my relationship I was in a sexless marriage for probably 5 of the 8 years, And so when I got out of that relationship, I knew that that was something that I really wanted to sort of grow in, and I knew that if I chose a partner, they would have to be somebody that was also a sexual person. And so yeah, I how did I manifest? Well, I started dating on Match.com. It was the only dating site that I knew at the time. There's so many more than that, and I started going on different dates, and I just really enjoyed the dating process. I do feel like a lot of people put so much emphasis on finding the right one that they don't enjoy just dating for dating's sake. And it can be a fun process just to meet different people and to really get to know who you are through the lens of other people. And so, yeah, so I went on my experimentation phase. I met lots of great guys, and yeah, I found my way. On the other side, I now consider myself a bisexual woman, which I had never considered myself prior to my marriage. And I also consider myself an ethically non-monogamous woman. I don't believe in monogamy. It's something that is a choice, and I choose to have open relationships. And I am in a committed relationship with one person, but we do have an open relationship.
That's quite a big change from where
Yes.
you were in marriage there. One
Absolutely.
one thing I really liked and made me sort of smile on your website, you referenced it before, is you talk about your own big clit energy, and I love that. I just wondered how you embody that statement, and how does it represent you with other people?
So, big clit energy is confidence in your sexuality.
Hmm.
It's the confidence that um, can hone really and can develop over time through experiences. And so I actually coined that term and I trademarked it. And big clit energy is something that I like to teach. I like to teach other women and empower other women to really own their pleasure and not be ashamed of it, because when we are ashamed of it, we often push down our desires that we really should be expressing. So big clit energy is just the confidence that a woman has in her sexuality, just like a man with big dick energy, right? And when you think of the term big dick energy, it's not about the size of the penis, right? And it's also not about the size of the clitoris. It's about your confidence, how you feel about yourself in the bedroom, and how that translates to other areas of your life. So it can translate to the boardroom. It can translate to me talking to you on this podcast or any other speaking engagements. It's really just a confidence that you build when you have a great sex life, and you and are you're willing to experiment and be yourself authentically.
Yeah, it is a very attractive trait in somebody if they're confident in themselves, not arrogant, but just have that level of confidence in who they are and what they want and everything. And I think it's quite often that we might feel something's wrong at work or something's wrong at somewhere else, whatever. We don't necessarily immediately look at our sex lives to think, is everything okay there? But it has such a bearing on how we feel and who we are. And it's interesting that it's perhaps not one of the first things that we look at. And one of the things you talk about quite a bit, which is really interesting, is the orgasm gap. I just wondered if you could touch on that a little bit, and how individuals and couples can work to try and bridge the gap, or to take the gap away altogether.
Absolutely. The orgasm gap is a phenomenon in heterosexual relationships where women have less orgasms than men. And the percentages differ, whether it be hookups all the way to marriage, but an orgasm gap does exist from hookups all the way to marriage. And so it's important for people to understand that, because a lot of times people will discount the fact that they have an orgasm. They're like, oh, well, I usually don't, so no big deal. No, it is a big deal. And you can change that about your relationship, but you do need to communicate your wants and desires. And so I like to teach people how to have those conversations, those uncomfortable, squirmy conversations with their partner. And unfortunately, they start off that way, but they can actually grow. Once you start having these conversations more, they become easier and easier, and they can end up being really sexy, fun conversations. So I like to encourage people to have a monthly check-in with their partners about how things are going in their relationship in general, what's going on financially, what's going on with the kids, what's going on with vacations, what's going on with our sex lives, but all of those things, all of the important things that you should be talking about. Your sex life should be something that you're having a conversation about on a regular basis, and that's how intimacy is going to grow in that realm. And so that is what the orgasm gap is, and one of my missions is to help women close that orgasm gap for themselves by these listening to podcasts like this, or by having conversations about it with their partners. And it doesn't exist, I have to say, in LGBTQ relationships or in the kink community, because they are having those conversations prior to having sex.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to someone recently in the BDSM community, and she was talking about one of the big sort of, I guess, turn-ons that they often have is in negotiating what is acceptable and what isn't. They sort of talk through everything and agree things. Whereas in the hetero community, perhaps we don't. Maybe we just do what we've always done, and we don't think about exploring new things, or we certainly don't talk about it in such a semi-formal way, I think. And I think there's a lot we can learn from other communities. And I think it's interesting that, I'll get the stats wrong, but something like 70% of women don't orgasm through penetrative sex, but 70% of men are convinced that their partner orgasms through penetrative, which doesn't quite add up statistically. so either the men are completely wrong and thinking, "Yeah, my wife always orgasms, she's always fine," and I think that's one of the sadnesses, really. If one partner thinks they need to fake something, the other partner believes something's happened that hasn't happened, and yeah,
Yes.
that can't be fulfilling at all, can it, really?
So 80% of women have faked it in their lifetime. Okay. 3 to 5% of women can orgasm from penetration alone. 95% of women need external clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm. So your numbers are a little bit off, but sometimes people will include in those statistics if you can orgasm with external stimulation and penetration together.
Okay.
So then the number then goes up from there. But from penetration alone, only 3 to 5% of women can orgasm from penetration alone. And it's a very small number. And so unless you're
Tiny.
asking your partner, did you get there?
Yeah.
You're not going to really know if they did or not. Because, one person's orgasm is not the same as another person's orgasm. And so something that might be, very quiet for one person might be like an explosion for another. And you really don't know unless you really
Yeah.
ask the person whether they did or not. And, you can really enjoy the experience with or without an orgasm. Now, I'm not saying that that should always be the end all be all, because the experience itself is beautiful and enjoyable. But if you always say, "Oh, well, I never have an orgasm, so that's not really my focus," you will never have one. And that is just not fair, because when you do have an orgasm, it is mind blowing, and everyone should experience that in their lifetime. And it's sad to me that so many women have never experienced it because they've never had the conversation.
And there's so many amazing toys, amazing positions that people can try together by themselves that can get you to this state. Like you said, there's no reason. Sorry, there are very, very few people that can't have an orgasm. There might be some people for a physical reason, which I completely understand, but in general terms, most people can.
Right.
And yeah, it's something not to be missed, really. It's one of life's, yeah. Take that off. I'll keep having those. They're great, and I think not
Absolutely.
to do that. Yeah, so I really like the Orgasm Revolution. T-shirts are available on Eve's website. I put a link to them. So I like the fact that it's something we should talk about and should try and explore how we can get to a place and try different things that appeal to different people. It's people change, life changes. So we should change our approach to how we are intimate with one another as well.
I agree. We do change throughout our lives, and what excites us in our 20s is not going to be the same as what excites us in our 50s and beyond. So, really understanding your body and how it does change and what sorts of things you like now as opposed to then. If you're always just assuming that you know what your partner needs and wants, you're going to miss out on a lot of fun. And the orgasm revolution is something that I started a couple of years ago, maybe like a little over a year ago, that brings awareness to the orgasm gap. And so if you get one of my t-shirts that you just mentioned and you wear it, you are now part of the orgasm revolution. You're bringing awareness to the orgasm gap. And if you post it on my site, I will repost it for the world to see that more people are joining the orgasm revolution. And I think, that these conversations are so important because they are bringing awareness to this topic that a lot of people don't know about or even talk about.
On your own excellent podcast, I advise everybody to listen to. After listening to this, of course, you've covered so many different topics. Have you learned a lot from the guests? Were there lots of surprises? How has it evolved over the time you've been doing it?
It really has evolved quite a bit, and I have evolved quite a bit. I think it's so
Yeah.
interesting that I really didn't realize it was going to be another layer of my healing journey. And having spoken to so many sex coaches and experts in the field, I really have learned a lot from them, and it really has helped me to heal another layer of my healing journey. And if you have experienced trauma in your lifetime, you'll know that it really is, a journey throughout your life, and you peel away the layers of healing. And so the podcast itself has been another healing layer, which I was not expecting, but I am so happy that it happened because it really has helped me to communicate so much better. I mean, I'm talking about sex all the time, so I have a lot of practice. And so my partner gets an earful.
Mm. When you go out with your girlfriends for coffee or cocktails, are they're straight away asking you all the questions about he did this, or I want to try this, what do you think about this? Are you the sort of the go-to person now?
I think I've always been that for my girlfriends. I think I've always been that for my girlfriends, and they've been that for me too. It's not just one way. It's just I'm very open and honest about what I do and what I enjoy, and so I feel like I gravitate to people like me. So yes, definitely that happens quite a lot.
We talked earlier on about one of the guests that you had, and we were talking about the importance of sexual health and testing and those sort of things. And I just wondered about your approach to sexual health and why you think it is that people don't necessarily view it in the same way they view other parts of the health. Something that should be regular checkups. We should be able to talk about it. We should go and see an expert. How important is good sexual health to all of us, really?
Well, when you look at the statistics on erectile dysfunction, for instance, 20% of men in their 20s start having issues with erectile dysfunction, and it goes up 10% per decade. So in your 50s, 50% of men have ED, 60% in their 60s, 70% in their 70s. So if you are dating in that age category, you are dealing with people who have sexual health issues, right? And so how do you communicate with a person who has a sexual health issue? So I think it's really important to look at your sexual health, and if you are having issues such as incontinence, painful sex, erectile dysfunction, dryness, decreased vaginal sensitivity, or other sexual health conditions, there's more, you should really think about looking at seeking help for those conditions. And that is, some of what I do in my practice. Inspire Health Physical Therapy. I help treat those conditions so that people can enjoy their sex lives. I think it's so important to not ignore this part of our health because, one, it can be a precursor to heart disease. So I recently had someone on the show that was talking about a tech ring that measures erectile function and nocturnal erections. And this tech ring, if you have 3 or more erections throughout the night, you are going to be less at risk for a heart attack or stroke. But if you have 2 or less, you are going to have a heart attack or stroke in the next 2 years. So it can be another vital sign that we are
Absolutely.
ignoring. And so sexual health is so important for our overall health. So if you're having a great sex life and your life, your sexual health is healthy, then you're gonna most likely be healthy in other areas of your life as well. So it's an important component of being a human being and living your life to the fullest.
Mm. And do you think perhaps men, as they get to my age in the sort of early 50s, they sort of think, oh, well, it's just part of life and it's part of getting old. Whereas there is something that can be done, whether it's medical or it's therapy or it's talking or it's discussing. I think maybe we just think, oh, it's just part of aging, really, not realizing actually we can do something about it.
I think that's a great point. I think a lot of people just think, oh well, it's part of getting old, and but no, who wants to lose the fun of life? You know what I mean? I'm not throwing that away, and I think that that is a common misconception for women too who are going through menopause. Oh,
Yes.
it's just a part of life. My joints are creaky and I'm sweating like a pig, and I can't sleep all night, and this is just part of menopause and whatever. And unfortunately, women have been given a disservice. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But what I'm trying to say is, hormone replacement therapy is something that was really controversial for many, many years,
Mm.
unfortunately, and it hurt a lot of women because really all of the things that they said that it was bad about, like causing breast cancer, etc., has really
Yeah.
been debunked. And hormone replacement therapy should be the standard for almost all women, unless you have experienced something very specific. Really, hormone
Hmm.
replacement therapy should be for every woman, and really men too. I mean, as you get older, your testosterone
Yeah.
decreases, and if you don't replace those hormones, you are going to have a whole host of symptoms that you don't have to have. There is optimal health and then there's normal health, right? And if we're talking about normal health in our 60s, let's say, right? Yes, our hormones are going to be decreased, but that doesn't mean that that's optimal health. Don't we want to live optimally until the day we die? So why not explore the avenues of replacing hormones so that we can really feel much better in our bodies?
Absolutely. I think there's a big difference between living and living well. I think I certainly prefer the latter. So we've all got the capacity now to live to a very old age, but we want to live to a healthy old age, and we don't want to be dependent on different things. We want to be able to do what we choose to do, really. And I think a lot of that is about, as you said, debunking or getting past some of the conditioning that we've had about sexual health and what's normal and what's normal in the pleasure that we look for. And I think pleasure is maybe an underrated word, really. That sex should be about pleasure, really. And I don't think it's something that people necessarily think about enough. So I'm sure there's lots of scientific evidence that shows that cortisol levels increase and your happiness the next day increases and all those sort of things. And as you say, it's a precursor, or it's a guide to how you're feeling generally. So I
Absolutely.
do hope people listen to your podcast, go to your website, and just learn more about what the people are doing. It doesn't nothing to say that everybody has to do everything. Of course not. But I do think being open and being able to communicate openly what you want is so important. And did you find, so when you came out of your marriage and you discovered that you had an attraction to women as well as men, did that change your views on how to help people? Did it give you a different understanding of people's needs and desires?
Um, I don't I don't know if it changed in that way because I've always been one to really help people. I've been a
Hmm.
physical therapist for a long time. Um, it certainly, opened my eyes to, what I like and don't like, and it was sort of a thing that grew over time. It wasn't suddenly like, okay, I'm divorced and now I can explore my bisexual, what I've
Yeah.
been like holding back. No, that wasn't that way at all. It was something that sort of developed over time and through experiences, and then really meeting somebody that I felt like I could really truly connect with on a level that was not just sexual, but also,
Mhm.
something that I would want to explore in terms of a relationship. So has it helped me to help people? I feel like I've been doing that all along. Honestly,
Yeah.
I really do.
And when did you decide that ethical non-monogamy was your lifestyle as opposed to perhaps the more traditional couple relationship? And how does that fit into your work? Is it something that people come and talk to you about in particular now? And do you have a guidance on how that should be approached? So I think of the sort of pitfalls of jealousy and all those sort of things. How do you handle those discussions?
I think jealousy exists in any relationship, whether it be
Yep.
a monogamous relationship or an ethical non monogamous relationship. Jealousy is just an
Mhm.
emotion, just like happiness and joy and anger and fear and sadness. It's an emotion that needs to be, managed and discussed. A lot of times, jealousy stems from the fact that you maybe feel less than, and it's a personal insecurity. And so, by talking that out, you can really kind of even become closer to your partner by really having these like very detailed conversations about why you were jealous, what about the situation made you not feel comfortable, etc. And so, really,
Mhm.
having these conversations can bring you closer. The ethical non monogamy just happened because, over time, I just realized that I knew I didn't want to get married again. After having done that once, and I am still experiencing the like backlash of that, unfortunately, and so I won't go into details of that, but I know that the statistics of marriage with your first partner is about 50% divorce rate, and it goes up with
Yeah.
second marriages, third marriages, etc. And so the statistics are just so against me, in a second marriage, that for me, I'm like, why would I want to put myself through that? I'm still feel like I'm still going through my divorce, even though we got divorced 8 years ago. Um, and so the non monogamy part just came out of understanding that not one person can check all of your boxes. And if you're putting all of the expectations on one person, that is a lot of pressure for just one
Yeah.
person to sort of fill, um, you know, that need of
Mhm.
yours. And so understanding that made me realize that it's okay to, want this from somebody and maybe want something else from somebody else, and that's okay. And it's not a negative thing, and it can really actually make you a happier person because you are really sort of expanding on the things that you really enjoy. Like, if my partner doesn't like to play tennis, but I want to play tennis, on a regular, hey, I have my tennis partner. Or, if my partner doesn't like to go to the beach and I love going to the beach, hey, I have my beach partner, and that sort of thing. So, not everyone can check off all of your boxes, and I think that that is
Yeah.
important for people to understand. Not one person is going to meet your every need.
No, and I think, as you say, I think almost expecting them to is just a recipe for failure, really,
Exactly.
because you put so much pressure on somebody to be everything that it's yeah, exactly as you say. You're never going to agree on every single thing, so it's not like people only have one friend that has to, yeah, be the tennis player, go to the beach with them, go to the city with them, want to sit inside and not go out long walks, wants to go on long walks. How are you going to find that one person? You're not, are you? So I think accepting that different people bring different things to your life is much more fulfilling, I would expect. I
Absolutely.
think one of the things you talk about on your website and on your podcast quite a lot, which I really love, is helping people feel body positive, and
Mm-hmm.
helping people be aware of how amazing they are. And I just wondered how do you help people that perhaps come to you and say, I put on, I don't know, £20 since we got married, I don't feel attractive, I don't want to look in the mirror, how can he or she possibly find me attractive, and sort of diminishing who they are? How do you help somebody to see themselves as others really see them and see themselves for the wonderful person that they are?
I think there's so many ways to really work on your body positivity.
Mhm.
Um, One way is to, I mean, our bodies are going to change from, the time we're born to the time
Yeah,
we die. Every single
hope
day,
so.
our body
Yeah.
is different, okay? And if you only are focused on, your perfect, 20-year-old body or whatever it was, and you always want to look like that, that's not going to be possible. Women get pregnant, then they
Yeah.
then the baby comes and you have stretch marks, and our bodies change. And even through menopause, I just gained 10 pounds. And how do you love yourself at every stage? So I think it's important to teach people how to love themselves at every stage. You may not like every single part of your body at every single
Mm.
stage, but what part of your body do you love at that stage? And what can you do to really make yourself feel good about your body? And taking care of yourself is so important. So I think nutrition is super important to really,
Mhm.
as a self care routine, to really, give yourself the nutrition and that is very healing. And so nutrition is one of those layers. And then exercise, moving your body in some way. It doesn't have to be going to the gym and lifting weights. Some people like to walk on the beach. Some people like to do yoga. Some people like to garden. Whatever the movement is, dancing around in your bedroom at night, whatever it may be, moving your body is important. And also moving your body sensually, I think, is important too. So watching yourself in the mirror move in a sensual way, I think that really can give you sort of a confidence in your body that you may not have had if you hadn't done that. Another beautiful way, I think, to connect with your body is to do self portraits of yourself. And they can be boudoir portraits, or they can be fully clothed, whatever you want, but in sexy positions, and really exploring your sensuality in that way. And that can really have people see themselves in a different light. If you use different filters and you crop the photos in certain ways, you can really get gorgeous pictures of yourself, and you would never have thought that could be you. And so I think that is another really great way to really connect with your body. And so I love to teach women and men how to connect with their bodies and to really love their bodies, the bodies that they're given, because we are sensual beings. Our bodies were built for pleasure. And if you are not exploring, all of the pleasure that your body can feel, you're missing out on a big part of life. And so, treating yourself to a sensual massage, or having your partner give you a sensual massage, and figuring out what those areas are that really turn you on. Because there are many parts of our bodies that are not necessarily the erogenous zones that can really be turn ons. And why don't we know that about ourselves? We should all
Yeah.
know that about ourselves. So, exploring that is another way to really build confidence in your body and in the beautiful experience that it can be to receive pleasure.
That's a great answer. And I think there's yeah, I talked to somebody recently, and they said something that's surprised me, and I felt very silly for being surprised. Really, I guess as a man, our genitals, they're there really, and we pretty much know what they look like, and we fully are aware of what goes where and everything. But this lady was saying that a lot of women haven't looked at themselves, looked at their vagina, looked at their vulva in a mirror, looked at it in detail, opened it, explored it, and they haven't ever looked. Wow, I think there's a as a guy, you think, oh my goodness, I'd be looking at it all the time. But I just, it's funny, isn't it? Is we, and I think that comes back to that conditioning that maybe as a kid we're told that's dirty or don't do that or whatever. Don't explore your own body. And I think yeah, I think having a sort of an hour to explore your own body, and as you said, find out that the crook of your elbow is an erogenous zone for you, finding out the palm of your hand is, finding out anything really. But it does, I assume, help the relationship if both people understand their own bodies as well as trying to explore what they want from their partner. And yeah, and there's beauty in all parts of the body. As you said, everybody's got a part that they think is beautiful, hopefully. But being able to look and explore, and I think one of the challenges, I guess, that we face now that we didn't face when I was much younger is there's such an easy access to pornography of all types, and it gives us certain expectations that all women are completely hairless apart from on their head. Lots of women have very neat vaginas and they all look like this, and it puts a lot of pressure on young women and on men to expect to perform and to look a certain way. And I do think that yeah, people perhaps that use pornography more often also, research shows, experience erectile dysfunction at an earlier age and find it more challenging. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on pornography. Not saying it's good or bad, because I spoke to people that are in the industry, wonderful people, really fascinating, and it's nothing to do with the performers or the content creators, just perhaps how we educate people around what it is about and what it does and what it offers, as opposed to people just being exposed to it suddenly at 13, 14. They can access anything on their phone. It's very different from looking at a magazine sort of 20 years ago.
Yes, pornography has certainly changed over the years, and it's so accessible now. And really, pornography is meant for entertainment, okay? It's meant to turn you on, but it's not meant to be sexual education. If you're looking at pornography to be sexual education, you are looking at it in the wrong way. It's meant to turn you on, it's meant to entertain, and you need to find your sexual education elsewhere. A lot of the time you see the same sort of tropes of, what sex is like. It starts with the blowjob, and then you go into the, penetration, and then you skip anything that really focuses on female pleasure. It's all about male pleasure.
Yeah.
And so we are missing a lot. And yes, there are lots of now pornography that you can find that's actually female oriented and designed by women, but it's not so accessible. Like, you have to search for it, and so it's important to understand that, because it's really just meant for entertainment. I think that porn can be a great tool in your toolbox, just like having toys in your bedroom,
Yeah.
side table or whatever. It's a great tool. You can use it to, in a coupled relationship, to turn each other on. You can share the things that you like to watch. It doesn't necessarily mean what you want to do, but visually it's what turns you on. But understand that, the men that are in, porn typically are much larger, in size wise, than men in general. The women are typically much smaller than women in general, and they choose women that have like smaller vulvas and smaller, bodies, and so all of that looks smaller. And so it's not what you see is not necessarily, the spectrum of what is out there in the world. And so if you're comparing yourself to that, it may lead you to feel not good about yourself. And so, there are doctors that sort of prey, I say prey on, people that, want their, penis to look bigger, or their vulva to, have smaller
Yeah.
lips, and they have these surgeries that, cut parts of their bodies. And this is not even like what we're talking about, where women's clitorises were removed, like in
Yeah.
Africa. And that practice is still happening. I forget the name of it, but I'm not talking about that.
Female genital mutilation.
Yes, exactly. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about people that are undergoing surgery
Yeah.
purposely because they want their vagina to look a certain way. And I just think that
Yeah.
that is just ridiculous. Really, never cut anything down there. You're cutting sensitive pleasure away, and just understanding that, there is a big spectrum of what a vulva looks like and what a penis should look like, and not to compare yourself to what porn is, because it's not the norm.
No, and I talked to a couple of porn actresses, and they were sort of explaining the process of filming. And they said you might watch it, and it's a 20-minute scene. And you think, oh my god, the guy's just like a rock, and it just keeps going, and change positions, upside down, backwards, forwards, etc. And she says, oh my goodness, it takes like 7 or 8 hours to film. We're cutting, we're stopping, starting again, getting hard again, taking tablets. And he said, it's just an exhausting. If you watched an entire sort of production of it, it would probably put you off forever. She said, they edit it together very beautifully, so it looks like something that's like just continuous, but it's not at all really.
Exactly. Yes.
And
Very true.
I talked to a lady called Inka Winters, and she does a feminist female-led porn, and it's so different. It's such a well. First of all, the cinematic production values are much higher, and it's incredibly sexy. And it's still sex. It's not soft porn. It's proper watching people have sex, but it's just a very different feel to it. You feel that the people in it are having pleasure rather than the man taking pleasure, if that makes sense. But again, it's not something you would necessarily fall across on, I don't know, Pornhub or whatever. It's on
Right.
a nice
That's what
website. It's very attractive, and
right.
you
You usually
have
have
to
to
look at it
pay for
harder.
that. You usually have to pay for those
Hmm.
sorts
Yeah,
of sites, which are available.
yeah,
If you're looking for porn and you're looking for something that is not male oriented, you can search, female oriented porn, and you can find, but it's typically, it's not on Pornhub, it's not on XXN,
no,
and so you have to kind of search and you have to pay. But it's available for sure. And I think it's a beautiful thing because we do need to have that other perspective too, the female
definitely,
perspective. And it can be
yeah.
just as sexy and sensual and such
It,
a turn on,
more so because it's the people in the films typically are still very beautiful, and yeah, it feels very different. I found watching it for research purposes, obviously. Between the two, it's but then
Research
you
and also hopefully pleasure too,
on a pleasure, absolutely, and talking to her, she was fabulous. And but I think a lot of people don't necessarily maybe realize or want to realize just how big an industry porn is. I mean, I think Pornhub owned companies alone get 4 billion hits a month. That's half the population of the world. I mean, that's extraordinary. 4 billion a month, and for them, it's a data game. You think how much data they've got? 4 billion hits a month. The data that they can sell on people is extraordinary. So yeah, it's a big business owned by big corporations. This is not a sort of gentle sort of cottage industry type thing.
which is why
Yeah,
I think it's so important to talk about sex. I mean, look at how many people are searching for sex online,
yeah.
and we're not talking about it. We need to be talking about it more. Like it's, another conversation that's normal to have because it really is a
Mm.
normal part of our lives.
If just coming on to that then, so if as a man I want to talk to my wife about something that I want to try or want to experiment with, and I've been thinking about it for I don't know, a few weeks, few months, few years, whatever. How do or how does a man or woman have that conversation and it be a sort of safe space to have it, as opposed to the person saying, "Nope, no, I'm like, no, what?" Because you don't want your partner of 30 years, 20 years, 10 years to think, "Oh my god, this guy's a pervert. He wants what?" And because they've never thought of it themselves, and it might be something fairly benign, but you don't want to put yourself in a position where where your sort of partner recoils from you. So how do you almost set the boundaries for this safe conversation? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that this is so much of what I talk about on my show is really opening up those conversations between partners because we assume that our partners in heterosexual relationships know what we want, right? And we just like jump on in
Yes.
and just pretend that they should know exactly what
Read your
buttons to
mind.
push and all of that. And it's impossible to read your mind. You have to
Yeah.
express what you need and want in a sexual relationship. And you also have to teach the other partner what works for you because with what works for one person may not be what works for another, and so you can't just translate the information that you knew from one relationship and put it onto the next. It doesn't work that way. You really have to have a communication. And unfortunately, society has taught us not to talk about these things. And especially in, older populations, they're going to have less practice having these conversations. I think that now, when I talk about people entering into relationships, I feel like within the first maybe few dates, if you know that the person's someone that you really like, I think you should really start talking about your desires and your kinks, because they may not be into it. And why are you wasting your time with someone that
Yeah.
is not going to be something that they're interested in doing? You know what I mean? So, really having these conversations early in earlier relationships is important. Now, if you're in a long term relationship and you've never had a conversation like this, I think starting small is important. Starting with, why don't we just do a sensual massage, and let's see if we can find spots on our bodies that we didn't realize were erogenous to us. I think that that's a really great place to start, and to just communicate about that. You can do it with clothes on, and then you can slowly go to clothes off, however you want. But I think it's really important to have these conversations. And if it's something that you've been thinking about for years and years, I mean, this is a lot of the reason why people cheat, is because they have a kink
Yeah.
that they've never spoken to their wife about or their husband about, and they want it. And so they go outside of their relationship, maybe with a prostitute or with a, um, whatever, to find those desires that they
Mm.
are not being met, because they were too afraid to have the conversation with the person that they love, that may be totally open to it, if they only said so. So definitely that. I think top three turn-ons is something that's a really fun conversation. Like, what are your top three turn-ons? And eventually asking, is there anything in the kink world or the kink realm that you are interested in, or you like to watch? And also maybe saying, if you were to search porn, what would you look for? Those are some sort of openers. But
Mm.
definitely having these conversations is so important, whether you have been in a relationship in a long-term relationship, or you're starting a new one.
Mm. No, yeah, totally agree. And I was talking to a really fascinating lady called Alexa Creed a few months ago. She's a dominatrix. She lives in Poland. She's relatively young, and she's very switched on, super intelligent. And she was saying that the reason that men come to her a lot of the time isn't about sex. It's because they're scared to say to their wife or their partner they want to explore the more submissive side of them, because as a man you're supposed to be. History is always the dominant man, etc., etc. And lots of men in very stressful jobs or any part of life might just want to be more submissive sometimes. But rather than have the conversation with their partner, they've gone and connected with Alexa, and she sort of works with them and yeah, gives them what they want, I guess. But sometimes the things that she gives them, you sort of think, oh, I'm sure the partner wouldn't mind that too much. It's not always about being tied up and sort of locked in a sort of cage or whatever. There are very different variants of these things, and I think something else. Another sex worker sort of told me that people come to her when they might want to say to their partners they want to explore other people or they want to try something different, whatever. But she said a lot of the time what they'd actually be happy exploring would be to do some role play and to meet your partner as a stranger in a hotel or whatever you never met. So it doesn't have to be the actual ultimate thing that they're talking about. But I think it all comes down to exactly as you said, is being able to talk about it, which
Yes.
obviously sounds sensible and straightforward, but it must be harder than we think. Otherwise, everybody would do it. And I guess never having done it and then suddenly having to do it, you just want to. I think as you said, was a really good thing to say. Is sort of start with start gently. Because if you think, well, I've been thinking about this thing for the last 3 years, I'm going to spring at my partner now. She or he's got to suddenly react in the moment. Let's just build up to it. Let's not sort of dive
Building
in with
Exactly.
the
Building up to it, I think, is great. And, sex is our adult playground. So doing things like role play, doing things like, having a date and you both meet at the bar, but you go in separate cars and you go up to the hotel room afterwards after they pick you up. I mean, these are things that you can do with your long term partner that can be
Yeah.
really fun and sexy, pretending that you're somebody else. And most people are not 100% dominant or 100% submissive.
Yeah.
A lot of people can play on both sides, and giving the other person the opportunity, if you are interested, for instance, if like you mentioned a man being more submissive, giving your partner the opportunity to be more dominant can be really fun for them, and really a creative process for them to really think about how they want to pleasure you. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. So,
Mm.
yeah, when you have these conversations, you can really give your partner the opportunity to be creative. And that's really what it's all about, is finding creativity in the bedroom so that you can really enjoy your sex life for years and years.
Two more questions, and I'll let you go if that's okay.
Okay.
Um, so the first one would be, and I often think this. So you obviously invest a lot of time with other people. I'm sure at times you hear some challenging things, some things that are perhaps uncomfortable. How do you look after your own mental and physical well-being? Because you want to be able to show up for your partner, for your clients, for whoever else as the best version of yourself. So how do you avoid carrying everything with you?
I think just having open communication is
Hmm.
important, because if you are constantly taking things in and then not expressing it, all of that can get stuck inside of you. Your emotions can
Yeah.
really get stuck inside of you. Sometimes, you do have a client that really affects you in a certain way, and you're like, oh, that made me feel bad or made me feel
Yeah.
some kind of way, right? And so really being able to express that in a different place, and obviously there's HIPAA, and we have to be careful about what we talk about with
Yeah. Of course.
our clients, etc. But
Hmm.
having a place to express yourself is really really important, and not letting things be held inside of you, emotions inside of you. It's really important to express those emotions. And so, and then of course, taking care of yourself. And I mentioned nutrition. Nutrition is so
Hmm.
important. We all need lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. So I always like to talk about making sure that you get all of those micronutrients, because that really helps your body to be healthier from the inside out. We want to have a healthy heart, so limiting what we eat in terms of meat intake, because meat has been linked to cancer and all sorts of other diseases, and so that's really important. So I do talk a lot about nutrition with my clients. I talk about sleep. Sleep is super important. We should be getting, everybody's a little bit different, but for the most part, 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Some people can get less, and that's okay, and they function well, but most people need enough sleep. Um, Exercising regularly, like I mentioned before, and just having like your own personal self care routine. I like to exercise. I like to go outside and walk. I like to, garden, and so just depending on the person, figuring out what those self care routines are that really help you to get in tune with your body and with yourself is so key.
Mm. And it's important to know. I think what we eat and drink affects how we taste, how we smell, how we come across to people, and yeah, I mean, you want to taste nice for your partner. Hopefully, you want
Absolutely,
you
and
want them to
pineapple
want to
is
taste
really
these
good for
things. So,
that.
yeah,
Pineapple is really good for
absolutely.
that, and also watermelon is such a great. I always talk about the watermelon challenge, and having watermelon every day for a week. 4 cups of the red watermelon or one
Hmm.
cup of the yellow watermelon, which I can never find. But the
No.
the red watermelon, 4 cups per day for a week, and you will see your erectile function and your erectile function of the clitoris as well improve. You're going to have more wetness. You're going to have more engorgement of the clitoris, and men are going to have more erections. So just that one thing can make a big difference.
I'm going shopping tomorrow, so I know what to add to the list now for sure. I'll
Excellent.
let you know how it
Make
goes.
sure you get a big one.
Uh, yes, and my final one was it's a hard one really. You've already done and achieved so much, and I just applaud you for that. But what are your goals and thoughts for the future? What does the future hold for you? Do you think?
think growing my practice, my physical therapy
Mhm.
practice, and growing the podcast as well. I really want it to be an international success. It's already in the top 2.5% globally, which is an honor. It's been in the top five in the U.S. and in Europe, but really growing into the Latin American space is really important to
Mhm.
me. So now it has been for the past, I would say, 6 or 8 months. It's bilingual now, where I have subtitles in Spanish, and so really growing into those Latin American countries is important to me because I am a Latina, and I definitely want to be able to offer, my education all over the world. So I think that is something that I want to do, and growing my coaching practice. So all of those things.
It sounds like a busy few years ahead. Thank you so much for your time. You've been everything I hoped for and more than I expected. So no, I really appreciate it. And again, it's just welcoming somebody that's very authentic and is happy to talk. And you answered everything wonderfully. So yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.